The Last War of Korveth Prime. The crimson sun of Korveth Prime hung like a bleeding eye in the violet sky, casting long shadows across the crystalline mountains that jutted from the planet's surface like the broken bones of some ancient leviathan. The air itself shimmered with ethereal energy, particles of stardust dancing in the thin atmosphere as two opposing forces gathered on the plains of eternal thunder. On the northern ridge, the Titans assembled in their terrible magnificence. Each stood 300 feet tall, their bodies carved from living stone and metal, inscribed with runes that pulsed with the power of forgotten civilizations. Their leader, Kronarch the Worldbreaker, raised his massive obsidian hammer toward the bleeding sky, and the very ground trembled beneath his feet. Brothers of the ancient earth, Kronarch's voice boomed across the wasteland, each word carrying the weight of collapsing mountains. Today we reclaim what was stolen from us eons ago. Today, we cast down the false gods who have grown fat on moral worship while we slumbered in the deep places of the universe. Behind him, 12 other Titans stood in formation. Pyraxis, whose body burned with the heart of dying stars. Glacius, whose breath could freeze entire worlds. Metallurg, whose skin was forged from the core of neutron stars. Each was a force of nature given terrible form, each a living weapon of primordial chaos. Across the plain, on the southern peaks that scraped the alien sky, the gods of the new pantheon had taken their positions. Unlike the crude, elemental forms of the Titans, the gods appeared almost human, their beauty terrible and perfect. They radiated power in waves that distorted reality around them, their presence causing the very atoms of Korveth Prime to sing in harmonious terror. Ethros, the god-king of light, stepped forward on feet that never quite touched the ground. His armor was forged from pure illumination, and his sword hummed with the collected prayers of a billion worlds. Golden wings unfurled from his shoulders, each feather a miniature star. Ancient ones, Ethros called out, his voice carrying across the dimensional barriers between them, your time has passed. The universe has evolved beyond your crude dominion. We offer you one final chance, return to your slumber, and we will allow you to dream of better days. Kronarch's laughter was like the sound of continents splitting. Dreams? We are done with dreams, Lightbringer. We have watched from the void as you pretty children played at godhood, collecting worship like children collect toys. You have forgotten the old ways, forgotten what it means to be truly divine. The Titan raised his hammer higher, and the runes along his arms blazed with ancient fire. Power is not given, young god. Power is taken. Power is earned in battle, forged in conflict, tempered in the blood of enemies. You have grown soft in your crystal palaces. Behind Ethros, the other gods stirred. Nyx, goddess of the void, her form shifting between shadow and starlight. Tempest, god of storms, electricity crackling between his fingers. Vitae, goddess of life, whose very presence caused alien flowers to bloom in the barren soil. Each represented an aspect of the new order, the evolved divinity that had replaced the raw, primal forces the Titans embodied. Soft? Tempest snarled, his eyes flashing with lightning. We who have shepherded civilizations across the galaxy. We who have guided evolution itself. You speak of the old ways as if brutality and destruction were virtues. They are the only virtues that matter, growled Pyraxis, stepping beside his leader. Molten rock dripped from his fingertips, hissing as it struck the crystalline ground. Creation without destruction is stagnation. Order without chaos is death. You have brought the universe to the edge of entropy with your guidance. Vitae raised her hand, and her voice carried the sound of spring rain on fertile earth. We have brought peace. We have brought prosperity. Worlds that once knew only war now flourish under our protection. Stagnation, Glacius rumbled, his words forming ice crystals in the air. Safety. Mediocrity. You have made the cosmos into a nursery, and its children will never grow strong. The tension between the two forces was building like a storm front. The very air began to crack and shimmer as their opposing energies pressed against each other. On the plains between them, the ground started to buckle and warp. Ethros drew his sword, and its light was like a second sun being born. Then you force our hand, ancient ones. We had hoped to avoid this conflict, but we will not allow you to drag the universe back into the dark ages of chaos and suffering. Dark ages? Kronarka's eyes blazed like supernovas. Those were the days when gods were forged in stellar fires, when only the strongest survived to shape reality. Those were the days when divinity meant something more than collecting prayers and granting wishes like cosmic nursemaids. The Titan took a step forward, and his footprint left a crater 50 feet deep. You want to see the old ways, pretty ones? You want to remember what it means to face a true god? Then come. Come and learn why we were called the World Breakers. Nyx stepped forward, her form shifting and flowing like liquid shadow. You are relics, old ones. Beautiful in your way, terrible in your power, but relics nonetheless. The universe has no place for your kind of brutality. Then we will make a place, Metallurg declared, his voice ringing like struck anvils. We will tear down your ordered cosmos and rebuild it in the image of strength. The battle began not with a charge or a war cry, but with a single gesture from Kronark. The Titan raised his hammer and brought it down upon the crystalline ground of Korveth Prime with such force that the planet's crust cracked like an eggshell. Seismic waves rippled outward, each one capable of leveling mountain ranges. Ethros met the attack by raising his sword and channeling pure light into a barrier that stretched across the southern ridge. The collision between seismic destruction and divine illumination created a shockwave that shattered 3 of Korveth Prime's smaller moons. Impressive, Kronark admitted, hefting his hammer again. But can your light withstand the fury of creation itself? The Titan's next blow struck not the ground, but reality itself. Space-time bent and twisted around his weapon, creating gravitational anomalies that pulled fragments of the shattered moons into a spiraling vortex of destruction. Tempest responded by raising his hands to the alien sky, calling down lightning that originated not from any storm cloud, but from the very fabric of the electromagnetic spectrum. Bolts of pure energy, each one carrying the power of a stellar flare, crashed down upon the Titan's position. Pyraxis laughed as the lightning struck him, his molten form absorbing the energy and glowing brighter. Is this the best the new gods can offer? Energy without substance? Power without weight? The Titan of Fire opened his mouth and breathed out a stream of plasma hot enough to ignite atmospheres. The beam carved through the alien landscape, melting crystalline formations and turning the very air into superheated gas. Vitae countered by thrusting her hands into the wounded earth, channeling life force into the planet itself. The ground responded by erupting with impossible vegetation, trees that grew to full size in seconds, their roots plunging deep enough to tap into Korveth Prime's molten core, their branches reaching high enough to scratch the planet's ionosphere. Life without purpose, Glacius observed, his voice dropping the temperature of the surrounding air by hundreds of degrees. Growth without direction. You create only to create, without understanding the necessity of endings. The Titan of Ice exhaled, and his breath carried the absolute cold of the space between galaxies. The alien forest that Vitae had grown flash froze, becoming a monument of ice sculptures that reflected the battle's terrible light in fractal patterns. You see only destruction where we see renewal, Nyx countered, her shadow form expanding to cover half the battlefield. Within her darkness, stars were born and died in accelerated cycles, each one a tiny universe of possibility. You cannot conceive of power that creates rather than destroys. Metallurg stepped into the Shadow Goddess's domain, his neutron star skin making space-time bend around him. Creation and destruction are the same force, child. You simply lack the wisdom to see it. The Titan of Metal struck the ground with his fist, and the planet's core responded to his call. Veins of liquid metal erupted from deep fissures, forming geometric patterns that hummed with harmonic frequencies. Each note in the cosmic song carried enough vibrational energy to shake apart molecular bonds. The gods responded as one, their combined power creating a symphony of divine force that challenged the Titan's crude harmony. Ethros' light wove together with Tempest's storm, Nyx's shadow danced with Vitae's life force, and together they created something greater than the sum of their parts, a manifestation of divine cooperation that the individualistic Titans could not match. You fight as one, Kronark observed, parrying a combined assault from 3 gods with his massive hammer. Like a hive mind, like insects. Where is your individual strength? Where is your personal glory? Glory? Ethros pressed his attack, his sword leaving trails of light that carved through the Titan's obsidian skin. Glory is what you sought, and it led to your downfall. We fight for something greater than ourselves. Greater than gods? Pyraxis laughed, grappling with Tempest in a contest that turned the surrounding air into a plasma field. What could be greater than divinity? Responsibility, Vitae answered, her life force healing the wounds that the battle was inflicting on Korveth Prime even as the conflict raged. Purpose beyond personal aggrandizement. The willingness to serve rather than rule. Service, Glacius spat, his ice breath creating a blizzard that would have frozen entire solar systems. The corruption of true godhood. You have made yourselves slaves to those weaker than you. We have made ourselves guardians, Nyx replied, her shadows wrapping around the ice titan like living chains. There is strength in protection, power in nurturing growth rather than simply demonstrating dominance. The battle raged across multiple dimensions as the combatants' power began to warp the fundamental forces of reality. Chronarcha's hammer strikes created temporal echoes, each blow landing in the past, present, and future simultaneously. Ethros countered by splitting his light into quantum probabilities, making himself exist in multiple states at once. You cannot defeat us, Metallurg declared, his voice now speaking in frequencies that existed beyond normal matter. We are the foundation upon which reality was built. Destroy us, and you destroy the universe itself. And you cannot defeat us, Tempest replied, his storm now encompassing entire probability matrices. For we are what the universe has become. We are its growth, its evolution, its future. The contradiction created a paradox that began to tear at the fabric of space-time. Korveth Prime itself started to phase in and out of existence as the battling forces pulled at the fundamental constants that held reality together. It was then that a new voice spoke, cutting through the chaos with words that carried the weight of absolute authority. Enough. The voice belonged to neither Titan nor God, but to something older and more fundamental than either. As the combatants paused in their battle, a figure materialized on the plain between them, ancient beyond measure, neither male nor female, neither light nor dark, but something that contained all possibilities within itself. Archon, Chronarch breathed, his hammer falling to his side. The first. I thought you had passed beyond the reach of physical existence. I had, the entity replied, its form shifting between states of matter and energy. But your conflict threatened to unmake everything that has been built since the first moment of creation. I could not allow that. Ethros lowered his sword, but his grip remained firm. Ancient One, these relics seek to drag the universe back into chaos. They would undo eons of progress. And these children, Chronarch countered, have stagnated the cosmos with their ordered safety. They have made gods into shepherds and mortals into sheep. The Archon considered both arguments, its form rippling with colors that had no names. You are both correct. And you are both wrong. The first being gestured, and suddenly all the combatants could see what it saw, the universe in its entirety, from the moment of its birth to the probability cascades of its potential futures. The Titans represent the force of change, of challenge, of the crucible that forges strength from weakness. Without them, existence grows stagnant and dies. The gods represent the force of growth, of nurturing, of the guidance that allows potential to become actuality. Without them, existence becomes mere chaos and achieves nothing. The vision showed worlds where only Titans ruled, planets of eternal conflict where strength was the only virtue, where civilizations rose and fell in endless cycles of violence. Then it showed worlds where only the new gods held sway, peaceful, prosperous, but slowly dying as their inhabitants lost the drive to grow, to challenge themselves, to reach for something greater. But together, the Archon continued, balance is possible. The question is whether you can set aside your pride long enough to see it. Pyraxis stepped forward, his molten form cooling slightly. You ask us to work with those who would cage the universe in cotton wool? And you ask us to partner with those who would burn civilizations for the sake of strength, Nyx replied, her shadows pulling back but not dissipating. I ask you to remember what you both forgot, the Archon said. That you are not enemies, but aspects of the same cosmic truth. Order and chaos, creation and destruction, growth and challenge, these are not opposites, but partners in the dance of existence. Vitae lowered her hands, allowing the life force she had been channeling to settle into the wounded planet. The mortals we protect, they need both nurturing and challenge to truly flourish. And the strength we forge, Glacius admitted reluctantly, means nothing if there is no purpose behind it, no goal worth achieving. Chronarch looked at his fellow Titans, then at the gods arrayed against them. Slowly, he set his hammer on the crystalline ground. You propose an alliance, Archon? After aeons of exile and conflict? I propose an evolution, the first being replied. A new form of godhood that combines the strength of the old ways with the wisdom of the new. But it will require sacrifice from both sides. Ethros sheathed his sword, though his expression remained wary. What kind of sacrifice? The Titans must accept that power without purpose is meaningless, that true strength comes not from dominion over others, but from the ability to lift others up to their potential. Chronarch's obsidian features twisted in something that might have been pain. You ask us to abandon everything we are. I ask you to become more than you are, the Archon corrected. Just as I ask the gods to accept that growth requires challenge, that protection can become imprisonment, that sometimes the greatest act of love is to allow someone to face danger and either triumph or fail by their own strength. Tempest's eyes flashed with conflicted lightning. You ask us to risk the beings we've sworn to protect. I ask you to trust them enough to grow, the Ancient One replied. To become partners in their own development rather than their caretakers. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of cosmic decision. On one side, the Titans, forces of primal power who had ruled through strength alone. On the other, the gods, shepherds of civilization who had guided through protection and care. Between them, the fundamental choice that would determine the future of existence itself. It was Vitae who spoke first, her voice carrying the sound of seeds taking root in fertile ground. There is wisdom in what you say, Archon. I have seen worlds grow stagnant under too much protection, children who never learned to walk because we carried them always. Metallurg nodded slowly, his neutron star form resonating with harmonic frequencies. And I have seen strength without purpose become mere destruction, power that created nothing but rubble and ruin. One by one, the other combatants began to speak, acknowledging the truth in the Archon's words. Glacius admitted that endless winters taught nothing if there was no spring to follow. Nyx confessed that shadows had no meaning without light to define them. Pyraxis acknowledged that fire without fuel consumed itself and died. Finally, only Chronarch and Ethros remained silent, the leaders of their respective factions locked in a stare that could have melted planets. You first, Ethros said quietly. You are the elder here. Chronarch's laugh was softer this time, more like distant thunder than breaking mountains. Perhaps that is the first lesson in this new cooperation, that age should defer to wisdom, not demand precedence. The Titan King looked out over the battlefield they had created, the wounded planet, the shattered moons, the cracks in reality itself. I have been many things in my existence, Lightbringer. I have been a force of nature, a breaker of worlds, a king of chaos. But I have never been a teacher. Never been a guide who helped others find their own strength rather than simply demonstrating mine. And I, Ethros replied, his golden wings folding against his back, have been a protector, a guardian, a keeper of peace. But I have never been a challenger. Never been one who pushed others to exceed their limits rather than simply keeping them safe within them. The two leaders extended their hands toward each other across the battlefield. When their fingers touched, the energy released was not destructive but transformative. Light and darkness, order and chaos, creation and destruction, all merged into something new, something that was greater than either force alone. The transformation spread to their followers, titans and gods alike, finding themselves changed by the union of opposing principles. Pyraxis discovered that his fire could warm as well as burn, could forge as well as destroy. Vitae learned that her life force could challenge as well as nurture, could demand growth as well as provide safety. The Archon smiled, its ancient features showing something like paternal pride. And so begins the age of the balanced ones, gods who understand that true divinity lies not in the extremes of any single principle, but in the wisdom to know when each is needed. As the merged energy of titans and gods began to heal the wounds their battle had inflicted on Korveth Prime, a new voice spoke from among their ranks. It was neither fully titan nor fully god, but something that partook of both natures. "What of the mortals?" the voice asked. "What of those who have worshipped us, feared us, depended on us? How do we explain this change to them?" Chronarch, or perhaps it was Ethros now, for they had become something more than either, considered the question. "We show them by example. We demonstrate that growth requires both challenge and support, that true strength comes from helping others discover their own power, that wisdom lies in knowing when to protect and when to push." "And if they reject this new way?" another voice asked. "If they prefer their gods simple, easily understood, clearly defined as either kind or terrible?" "Then we accept their choice," came the reply, "but we do not abandon our own growth for their comfort. We become what the universe needs us to be, not what they want us to be." The Archon began to fade, its form becoming translucent as it prepared to return to whatever realm beyond existence it had emerged from. "The hardest lesson of godhood," it said, "is learning when to act and when to refrain from action, when to intervene and when to trust in the strength you have helped others develop." "Will we see you again?" the question came from multiple voices, the newly merged consciousness of Titan and God alike. "When you are ready to face the next evolution," the Ancient One replied. "When you have mastered this balance and are prepared to transcend it. For even this new form you have taken is not the end, but merely another step in the eternal dance of growth and change." As the Archon disappeared, the transformed beings turned their attention to repairing the damage their battle had caused. But now their efforts were coordinated, balanced, destruction followed immediately by reconstruction, challenge paired with support, growth guided by wisdom and tempered by strength. Korveth Prime itself seemed to respond to this new approach. The planet's crystalline formations began to grow in new patterns, creating structures that were both beautiful and functional, artistic and practical. The shattered moons reformed themselves not as they had been, but as something new, orbital gardens that could sustain life while serving as waypoints for travelers among the stars. In the days that followed, the balanced ones began to understand the true scope of their transformation. They found they could appear to mortals as their old selves when needed, as protective gods when guidance was required, as challenging titans when growth demanded adversity. But their true form was the synthesis of both aspects, the understanding that divinity itself was not a static state but a dynamic balance. The first test came when they encountered a world locked in eternal war, where mortals had prayed for centuries for their gods to intervene and bring peace. The old gods would have imposed harmony through divine decree. The old titans would have let the strongest survive and called it natural selection. Instead, the balanced ones did something different. They appeared to the warring factions not as saviors or judges, but as teachers. They showed each side the true cost of their conflict, not just in lives lost, but in potential unrealized, in growth stunted by endless violence. But they also showed them that peace was not the absence of conflict, but the presence of conflict channeled toward constructive rather than destructive ends. "You have the strength to destroy each other," they told the mortals. "Now show us you have the wisdom to build something greater than what either of you could achieve alone." Some of the mortals rejected this approach, demanding that their gods choose sides and grant them victory. Others embraced it, beginning the long and difficult work of transforming enemies into partners, competition into collaboration. "This is harder than the old way," one of the balanced ones observed. "When we simply protected or simply challenged, the results were immediate and clear." "But not lasting," another replied. "Protection without growth creates weakness. Challenge without support creates despair. This new path is harder, but the results will endure because they come from within those we help, not from our external power." As they worked with world after world, civilization after civilization, the balanced ones began to discover new aspects of their transformed nature. They found they could exist simultaneously across multiple dimensions, helping countless beings at once while still maintaining their individual consciousness. They learned to communicate not just through words or actions, but through direct transmission of understanding, sharing not just knowledge, but wisdom. But perhaps most importantly, they learned humility. Each success taught them how much they still had to learn. Each failure showed them that even divine wisdom had its limits. Each interaction with mortals revealed new depths to the complexity of existence itself. We are not the end of divine evolution, one of them realized during a particularly challenging intervention. We are simply another step in an infinite progression. And that, came the reply from their collective consciousness, may be the most important lesson of all. That true power lies not in reaching a final state of perfection, but in maintaining the willingness to continue growing, changing, learning. Years passed, or perhaps millennia, for time moved differently for beings who existed across multiple dimensional planes. The balanced ones became known throughout the galaxy not as distant gods to be worshipped or feared, but as elder siblings in the great family of consciousness, beings who had walked the path of growth a little longer and were willing to share what they had learned. Some worlds embraced their teaching and flourished, developing civilizations that balanced individual strength with collective wisdom, personal achievement with mutual support. Other worlds rejected their guidance and chose their own paths, some toward greater wisdom, others toward familiar patterns of conflict and stagnation. Should we not do more to help those who refuse our guidance? The question arose during one of their collective meditations. What would that make us? Came the response. Shepherds again, imposing our will because we believe we know better. The right to choose one's own path, even if that path leads to hardship, is the most fundamental aspect of consciousness. But watching them suffer when we could prevent it is the price of respecting their autonomy. We offer our wisdom. We demonstrate better ways. We remain available when they are ready to ask for help. But we do not force growth upon anyone, for forced growth is not growth at all, but merely another form of control. This principle was tested most severely when they encountered a civilization on the verge of destroying itself through ecological collapse and resource wars. The mortals of this world had explicitly rejected divine intervention, declaring their independence from all gods and their determination to solve their problems through their own efforts. We could save them, one of the balanced ones argued. A small intervention, barely noticeable. Restore their atmosphere, replenish their resources. They would never even know we had acted. And rob them of the opportunity to learn from their mistakes, another replied. To develop the wisdom that comes from facing the consequences of their choices. We would save their bodies and doom their souls to eternal immaturity. But if they fail, if they destroy themselves, then they will have chosen their own fate, and that choice itself is sacred. Our role is not to prevent all suffering, but to ensure that those who wish to learn from their suffering have the opportunity to do so. In the end, they chose a middle path that embodied their new understanding of balance. They did not intervene directly, but they did make subtle adjustments to the cosmic background radiation of that region of space, changes so minute that they could not be detected by the mortals' instruments but which would slightly increase the efficiency of certain renewable energy technologies the mortals were already developing. The intervention was successful, barely. The civilization pulled back from the brink of collapse not through divine salvation, but through their own desperate innovation, spurred by necessity and guided by the faintest touch of cosmic assistance. The mortals never knew how close they had come to extinction, or how the tiniest adjustments to physical laws had made their salvation possible. Is this what the Archon meant by balance? One of the balanced ones wondered. This constant weighing of intervention against autonomy, help against self-reliance? Perhaps, came the reply. Or perhaps balance itself is something we must learn to define anew with each situation we encounter. Perhaps the point is not to find the perfect formula, but to keep asking the questions. As their understanding deepened, the balanced ones began to encounter other evolved beings in the cosmic community, entities that had undergone their own transformations, their own syntheses of opposing principles. They met the harmonizers, who had learned to balance individual expression with collective unity. They encountered the navigators, who had synthesized exploration with preservation. They came across the cultivators, who had unified creation with curation. We are not alone in this evolution, they realized. The entire universe is growing, changing, finding new ways to balance the fundamental tensions of existence. This realization led to a new phase of their development, not just helping individual civilizations, but beginning to work with other evolved beings to address cosmic-scale challenges. They found themselves facing questions that no single type of consciousness could answer. How should sentient species interact with non-sentient but complex ecosystems? What obligations did advanced civilizations have to emerging ones? How could the universe continue to grow and change without losing the wisdom of the past? These challenges required not just balance within themselves, but balance between different types of evolved consciousness. The balanced ones brought their understanding of the tension between protection and challenge. The harmonizers contributed their knowledge of individual versus collective needs. The navigators shared their insights into the balance between stability and change. Working together, they began to develop what they called the cosmic consensus, not a set of universal laws imposed from above, but a framework for decision-making that could be adapted by any form of consciousness to its particular circumstances and challenges. The universe is teaching itself, one of the balanced ones observed during a particularly complex negotiation between multiple evolved species. Each of us represents one aspect of cosmic consciousness learning to understand itself more fully. And we are all students, another added. No matter how far we have evolved, there is always more to learn, always new challenges that require new forms of growth. As the eons passed, the balanced ones found their nature continuing to evolve. They began to work not just with individual beings or civilizations, but with the fundamental forces of the universe itself. They learned to collaborate with gravity to guide the formation of new star systems that would be optimal for life. They partnered with electromagnetism to facilitate communication between distant civilizations. They worked with the strong and weak nuclear forces to encourage the formation of elements that would support new forms of consciousness. We are becoming midwives to reality itself, they realized. Helping the universe give birth to new forms of complexity, new types of awareness, new possibilities for growth and understanding. This cosmic midwifery required an even deeper understanding of balance. They had to know when to act and when to refrain, when to guide the natural processes of cosmic evolution and when to trust in the inherent wisdom of existence itself. They had to balance their desire to help with respect for the autonomy of the universe to develop according to its own inner nature. The greatest test of this new role came when they detected signs of an approaching cosmic transition, a fundamental shift in the nature of reality itself that would make their current form of existence impossible. The universe was preparing to evolve beyond the need for consciousness as they understood it, beyond the tension between order and chaos that had defined their existence. Are we to become obsolete? The question rippled through their collective awareness. Have we guided the universe so well that it no longer needs guides? Or have we learned well enough to trust in what comes next? Came the response. Have we grown wise enough to release our attachment to our current form and embrace whatever evolution awaits? The approaching transition would not destroy consciousness, they realized, but would transform it into something so fundamentally different that their current understanding could not encompass it. They faced the ultimate test of their evolved wisdom, the willingness to let go of everything they had become in service of what the universe was becoming. This is the final balance, they understood. The balance between clinging to familiar forms of existence and embracing the unknown. The balance between our love for what we have been and our trust in what we might become. As the cosmic transition began, the balanced ones felt themselves changing once again. But this time, the change was not a synthesis of opposing forces they already understood, but a dissolution into something entirely new. They felt their individual consciousnesses beginning to merge not just with each other, but with the very fabric of reality itself. In their final moments as discrete beings, they looked back on their journey from the crude power struggles of titans and gods to this ultimate transcendence. They saw how each stage of their evolution had prepared them for the next, how each crisis had contained the seeds of greater wisdom. We began as enemies, they realized, seeking to impose our vision on the universe. We learned to become partners, working together to guide the universe's growth. Now we become one with the universe itself, trusting in its wisdom to carry forward what we have learned. The last coherent thought of the balanced ones was not regret for what they were leaving behind, but gratitude for what they had been privileged to experience and wonder for what would emerge from the transformation they were undergoing. As they dissolved into the cosmic transition, their essence became part of the fundamental structure of the new reality that was emerging. Their hard-won wisdom about balance, their understanding of the dance between opposing forces, their knowledge of when to act and when to refrain, all of this became encoded in the basic laws of the transformed universe. In the new reality that emerged from the transition, consciousness took forms that the old universe could never have supported. Beings existed who were simultaneously individual and collective, temporal and eternal, finite and infinite. They faced challenges and opportunities that transcended the old categories of order and chaos, creation and destruction, protection and challenge. But in meeting these new challenges, they drew unconsciously on the wisdom of the balanced ones, on the lessons learned through eons of struggle and growth and synthesis. The balance that had been achieved through conscious effort in the old universe became an unconscious foundation for the new forms of existence. And somewhere in the quantum foam of the transformed reality, in the spaces between thought and being, between possibility and actuality, the essence of what the balanced ones had learned continued to evolve, to grow, to face new challenges and discover new forms of wisdom. For the universe itself had learned the most important lesson of all, that true power lies not in reaching any final state of perfection, but in maintaining the eternal willingness to grow, to change, to transcend whatever limitations currently define existence. The battle between titans and gods on Korveth Prime had ended not in victory or defeat, but in transformation. And that transformation had become the seed of an evolution that would continue for as long as consciousness itself existed, an eternal dance of growth and transcendence, challenge and support, wisdom and wonder. In the end, they had discovered that the greatest battle was not between opposing forces, but the constant struggle to remain open to whatever new forms of existence the universe might offer. And in that struggle, every being that had ever existed, titan and god, mortal and cosmic entity, individual and collective consciousness, played an essential role in the ongoing story of existence itself. The crimson sun of Korveth Prime had long since gone nova and been reborn as something unrecognizable, but the lesson learned beneath its alien light continued to echo through reality, that true divinity lies not in power over others, but in the wisdom to help all existence reach its fullest potential, whatever form that potential might take. And the dance continues, eternal and ever-changing, in forms we cannot imagine but which carry within them the seeds of everything we have learned about what it means to truly be alive.